They thought they won. They really did. They thought they got away with it. Yo, they thought they had the last word. They thought they played in your face. They thought they walked away, left you holding all the pain, all of the confusion, all of the questions, and somehow escaped the consequences. And if you've ever looked back on a relationship, a friendship, a family situation, a season of your life and thought, they really thought they got one over on me. They really thought I was never going to recover. They really thought I was going to stay there forever. Then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because some people really do believe they won. They think they won because they left. They think they won because they lied. They think they won because they manipulated. They think they won because they betrayed. They think they won because they moved on first. They think they won because they looked happy afterward. They think they won because you were the one left trying to put the pieces back together. And let's be honest. That's one of the hardest parts of going through anything painful. It's not always the pain itself. Sometimes it's watching the people who caused the pain act like they escaped it, like they weren't affected, like they didn't care, like none of it mattered. And if you've ever experienced that, then you know the questions that come afterward. Did I mean anything to them? Did they ever love me? Did they ever care? Was I stupid? Was I naive? Did they really just get away with it? Because when somebody hurts you and appears to thrive afterward, it can make you question everything. It can make you question your judgment, your worth, your value, your understanding of reality. It can make you wonder if maybe they were right and you were wrong. And honestly, I think that's the real reason so many people become obsessed with the idea of revenge, not because they're evil, not because they're bitter, but because they're trying to restore meaning. They're trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. They're trying to understand how somebody could do what they did and still walk away smiling. Because deep down, we want life to feel fair. We want actions to have consequences. We want pain to mean something. And when it doesn't look like that's happening, we suffer twice. Once because of what happened. And again, because it looks like they got away with it. Here's what you probably didn't understand at the time either. They thought they won because they misunderstood what game was actually being played. They thought the game was who leaves first, who hurts less, who moves on faster, who looks happier, who appears stronger, who gets the last word. But that was never the real game. The real game was always who becomes. Think about that. Because if somebody leaves your life and you become stronger, wiser, more discerning, more self-aware, more self-respecting, more emotionally free, did they actually win? If somebody betrays you and that betrayal eventually teaches you boundaries, self-trust, discernment, and self-worth, did they actually win? If somebody abandons you and that abandonment eventually forces you to discover your own strength, did they actually win? Or did they simply misunderstand what was happening? Because maybe they thought they were witnessing your destruction, but they actually were witnessing your transformation. Maybe they thought they broke you, but really they introduced you to yourself. Maybe they thought they took something from you, but really they forced you to discover something you didn't know you had. And I know that sounds difficult to accept when you're in the middle of pain, because when you're suffering, growth doesn't feel like growth. It feels like punishment. It feels like loss. It feels like failure. It feels like humiliation. It feels unfair. And if you're in the middle of that season right now, I want you to know that it's okay if you can't see the meaning yet. Because most people don't. Most people only understand their transformation after they've already survived it. Look back at your own life. How many experiences have you survived that you thought were going to destroy you? How many people have you lost that you thought you couldn't live without? How many seasons did you think were the end of your story? And yet here you are. Still standing, still learning, still becoming. And I think that's one of the most misunderstood things about human beings. People judge us by our worst chapter. They judge us by our hardest season. They judge us by the moment they encountered. And then they assume that's who we'll always be. But human beings aren't static. We evolve, we grow, we rebuild, we transform. And that's why so many people miscalculate us. Because they think the version of us they knew is the version will always remain. They don't realize that pain changes people. Not always immediately, not always beautifully, but pain changes people. Sometimes pain teaches you to trust yourself. Sometimes pain teaches you to protect yourself. Sometimes pain teaches you to stop abandoning yourself. Sometimes pain teaches you to finally choose yourself. And that's exactly what happened to so many of us. Because if we're being honest, before some of these experiences happened, we didn't know our worth. Before some of these experiences happened, we tolerated things we never should have tolerated. Before some of these experiences happened, we confused being needed with being loved. We confused sacrifice with worthiness. We confused loyalty with self-abandonment. And then life happened. People happened. Pain happened. And suddenly we were forced to ask questions we never had to ask before. Who am I? What do I deserve? What am I willing to tolerate? Why did I think I deserved less? Why was I so afraid to lose people who were comfortable losing me? Those questions change a person. Those questions create a different kind of strength. Not the kind of strength that comes from pretending you're okay. The kind of strength that comes from finally understanding yourself. And there's a verse in Genesis that said, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And whether you understand that spiritually, psychologically, philosophically, or simply through your own life experience, the principle remains the same. Human beings have an extraordinary ability to transform suffering into meaning. Not because suffering was good, not because pain is fair, but because we have the ability to decide what our experiences mean. This became one of the reasons I wrote Phoenix, From Stability to Power. Because eventually surviving isn't enough. Eventually you want to understand what happened. Eventually, you want to know why you stayed, why you tolerated, why you doubted yourself, why you abandoned yourself, and most importantly, who you're becoming because of it. Because eventually something shifts. Eventually, you stop asking, how do I make them regret what they did? And you start asking, how do I make sure I never abandon myself again? That's a completely different question, because one question gives them power. The other question gives you power. And maybe that's the biggest thing they never expected. They expected you to stay angry. They expected you to stay hurt. They expected you to stay confused. They expected you to spend years trying to prove something to them. They expected you to build your entire life around what happened. They expected you to stay the version of yourself they benefited from. They never expected you to heal. They never expected you to grow. They never expected you to trust yourself. They never expected you to become emotionally free. They never expected you to realize that your life was never supposed to revolve around them. And honestly, maybe there was a time when you didn't expect that either. But look at what happened. You survived. You learned. You changed. You leveled up. You grew. You became. And maybe that's why so many people eventually stop wanting revenge. Not because what happened stopped hurting. Not because they forgot. Not because justice suddenly arrived, but because eventually they realized something. The greatest victory was never making the other person lose. The greatest victory was refusing to lose yourself. The greatest victory was rebuilding. The greatest victory was becoming. The greatest victory was creating a future that was bigger than what happened. Because if you're still here, if you're still learning, if you're still growing, if you're still fighting for your life, your peace, your purpose, your future, then maybe they didn't win after all. Maybe they misunderstood the entire game because they thought they won. But they never understood what you were capable of becoming. And honestly, neither did you until now. You win. Game over. Peace, blessings, love, and power.